Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of College Hockey Talk. On today's podcast, I'm joined by former Boston College women's hockey player and current Boston Pride player, Allie Thunstrom. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, Allie, and how's everything going?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Everything's going great. The weather here in Boston is significantly improved to what all my family back home in Minnesota is seeing, so can't complain about that too much.
Oh, yeah, for sure, especially since it's going to be like snowing again at the end of the week, so I'm trying to enjoy it now.
Exactly.
Well, every interview I've seen from you, you always talk about your pro hockey experience. So I'm curious to how often you get to talk about your college hockey experience because I'm really excited to get to know you a little bit more from that side of things today.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I think, you're exactly right. A lot of things now, everything's talking present day. And I think even back to, definitely playing with the Whitecaps in Minnesota, people didn't talk about East Coast hockey very often. So it never came up. So I can't really even remember the last time I've talked about my experience at BC, but definitely excited to do that today.
Well, let's start off from the beginning and kind of work all the way up to your senior year. So, you were from Maplewood, Minnesota. So, how'd you start playing hockey and talk about what it was like growing up there?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously coming from Minnesota, it's a huge hockey state. It feels like a rite of passage as a kid to put on skates as soon as you can walk. And I remember my first time on skates was at my aunt and uncle had a cabin on a lake, and I think they gave me these skates that had like two blades on them, and I just loved it, instantly did it. But I had two older brothers that started playing hockey before me, and that's really where I got into it. And I started begging my parents. I could barely even form sentences, and I was just like, I want to play, I want to play. And they first signed me up in ringette. Because, at the time, not to age myself, but women's hockey wasn't really a thing. There weren't girls' hockey programs. And so, it was new to our entire family. And so they're like, oh, I don't know that girls play hockey, but I know they play ringette. So they signed me up for that. And I was probably like four-ish and maybe even on the cusp of three. And I would come home every day and I said, I want to play with the puck. I want to play with the puck. And so finally, the following year, they signed me up in the same organization that my brothers had played in. And from there, it was just that is where I wanted to be at all times, and just kind of took off from that. But it really started with my brothers for sure.
That's awesome. And I didn't know, I thought ringette was a more of a Canadian thing than an American thing, but that's cool that they have it in
Yeah,
Minnesota.
yeah, it definitely is. It's very big in Canada, but we have it in Minnesota, I guess. So I tried that out for a year, but really wanted to move towards playing with the puck.
Now, growing up, who was your favorite hockey player? Was it someone in the NHL or was it a women's player in the national team? Because I know a lot of people were inspired by that 2002 USA team or the 1998 one as well.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the '98 team was really awesome for me as a player to see women playing at that level, because to that point, there really wasn't a lot of exposure to it. But my favorite player by far growing up was Pavel Bure. I was obsessed with him. Um, I wanted to be him in every way, and I told my parents like I'm gonna be like Pavel when I grow up. And bless their hearts, they never told me that like, hey, it's not really a path for you to do that. So they just encouraged me, and now luckily there is a path, but he was always my number one.
And before college hockey, you played for your high school at North St. Paul. So talk about your experience there.
Yeah, I mean, high school hockey in Minnesota is unlike anything else. So being able to play for your community high school, it's just such a awesome experience. The whole town gets in on the games. Those are some of the most fun experiences of my life, and you're playing with your best friends that you've grown up with through the years. Since I grew up playing boys hockey, I was in the St. Paul area. So I moved into that district a little bit later, but instantly it's like a family. And to be able to be in class every day with these kids and to have grown up with them and be able to compete on the ice is just such a special experience.
And what's your best memory from your high school hockey days?
Definitely has to be, I believe it was my sophomore year. We were in the state tournament, and in the quarterfinal game. So just to kind of set the stage, we were playing at Ritter Arena where the Gophers play. And the entire stands was packed. I think it was a sold out series or session. And we were playing Egan. So Natalie Darwitz's dad coached there. Just a very storied program. And all of a sudden, we found ourselves down 5-2 going into the third period, and somehow we rallied back to score four unanswered and win that game 6-5. And it was just one of the most electric experiences I've ever been a part of.
Yeah, that's awesome. And talk about what it's like a little bit being part of the Minnesota high school hockey scene, because I'm from the East Coast and it's sort of hard to understand just how big it is if you're not from Minnesota, because I've seen the clips of how you guys sell out the XL Center
Hmm.
for a high school hockey game, which is pretty unbelievable. But also for women's hockey, it's pretty cool because most women's hockey players here in the East Coast, from what I've been told, have to go to prep school in order to sort of get noticed by Division One. But in Minnesota, you can play for your public high school and still get noticed by Division One schools. So how cool is it to be a player in that scene and just talk about how unique it is compared to other places in the country?
Yeah, it definitely is. And that's something I learned going to BC and hearing about my teammates' experiences. And they're just so vastly different. But yeah, for us, I mean, we don't have the traditional like tier one scheduled. Nowadays, it is becoming a little bit more common to have a what we call a before and after, where those teams get together with a conglomeration of kids around the cities, and then they'll play games before the high school season starts, and then resume back and go to nationals and do all of that. But for us, high school hockey was, kind of what you worked your way towards being part of. And exactly the part like kind of mentioned before, it's you're playing in your town, in your community, where you grew up. It's just based on your zip code. It's based on where you live. And so these are people you've been around for, in a lot of cases, your entire life. So you have that, progression from youth hockey into high school hockey, and it's so special in that regard. But as far as like the production of high school hockey in Minnesota, it's nothing like anywhere
Mhm.
else. The boys rally behind the sports team. And, our newspapers, our news stations, all they do such a tremendous job covering high school sports that, I look back on my dad made the scrapbooks for any time that like we were mentioned in the Pioneer Press or the Star Tribune, and it's a lot. And so as a kid, you know, having kind of that kind of eyes on you and celebrating the town's success and the whole town just rallying behind it is so special. And I know coming to BC, learning about a lot of my friends that went to prep schools or just played tier one hockey, it's just such a different world. But in Minnesota, we're really lucky to have such a strong high school system to be able to just stay at home and play at a really high level with so much support behind you. But it's really an electric environment.
And how did your high school hockey experience help you prepare for college hockey with Boston College?
Yeah, I think the competition in my era in high school was really, really high. There's hundreds of girls every year that go on to play college, whether it's D3 or D1. So you're consistently playing against really high caliber players that eventually are in the same, league that you are. So I think that number one for sure helps playing against such high levels of competition. I know for me at North St. Paul, one of our biggest rivals was South St. Paul, and the class directly ahead of me, I think there were 6 girls that went D1. So that's the type of competition that you're playing against night in and night out. So that part for sure helped. But I think also playing in that type of atmosphere with so many fans, you get to a lot of the rinks, especially the Minnesotas, the Wisconsin, that sell out a lot of their college games. That can be a really daunting experience playing in front of so many fans that are so passionate. And so having the opportunity to do that a lot and play in like very packed houses with a lot of fans with the noise, I think definitely helps transition into the college game where it's different, but you're at least used to some of those stressors and kind of getting used to that noise. And so that part definitely helped.
Now, talk about your recruitment process to Boston College. What made you want to go there versus other schools you might have looked at?
Yeah, it's funny. I was just reminiscing about this the past weekend with a couple of my friends that came to visit. They're like, "How did you end up out here?" And it's a weird story. I my entire life had thought, I want to be a gopher. I want to be a gopher. It's the Minnesota kid in me, and that's what I was on the path of. I was like, "Yep, I'm going to stay at home. I'm going to do that." And everybody throughout the recruiting process had always told me, like, when you step on campus, you'll just know. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. Like, this is where I want to go. Like, I'm confused, whatever. And so I was just kind of dead set, like, that's what I'm going to do. And I looked at other places and I didn't get any feelings. And I was like, I don't know. So the summer going into my senior year of high school, I was almost 90% that I was gonna just stay in Minnesota, and at national camp, the BC coach happened to be the coach of my team, and he was kinda, like, giving me crap. He's like, "Oh, you Minnesota kids, you never even look out east, like, you just stay at home," and he's like, "You're doing yourself a disservice. You should at least go look." And oddly enough, the movie Fever Pitch had come out, like, that summer. I had just watched it, I don't know, and they showed Fenway a lot, and so I was like, "Well, I kinda would love to see Fenway. So, Mom, why don't we just go out for a weekend or a couple days and see the schools in the area?" And really, that was my motivation, was to see Fenway. And so I came out and visited, and I had seen the other schools in the area. I visited Harvard, Northeastern, and my last visit was BC. And walking onto the campus, I think I got that feeling, and I was just like, "Wow, this place is incredible." It was nothing like anything I'd ever seen. The architecture, just everything about it, and luckily, there was a pretty decent size to obviously the academics of BC. It just seemed like, how could you pass up that opportunity to get an education at a school like BC? And just that homey feeling and how incredible the campus is really what made my decision to go to BC.
Yeah, and obviously, did you enjoy Fenway Park when you were there? Because that was the
I
Red Sox
did,
were
yeah.
those fans were crazy back in that time period.
Yeah, I think I got very spoiled. I had a couple of friends that parents had season tickets throughout my years of BC, and we got to go to a few games. And at that time, the Twins played out of the Metrodome, which is a dramatically different feel than Fenway. And so I always say I think I was pretty spoiled at getting to experience Fenway in that capacity because it's unlike anything else.
Now, what was like the biggest adjustment you had to make to college hockey? Was it the speed of the game, the physicality, or just the decision making since the game's a lot faster?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of all of those things. Definitely, I felt like instantly I walked in and I was like, wow, these players are all incredibly strong. I felt like one of the smaller people on the ice, which wasn't necessarily abnormal, but it was definitely very noticeable. And then the game is just much faster. And you go from, I mean, high school hockey in Minnesota and even playing at the tier one type tournaments, 3, 4 years ahead of you. So it just was, you didn't have as much time and space as maybe you were used to, and everybody around you was the best of their teams across the entire country. So the speed of the game, the talent that existed, you never had a shift off. Everybody on the ice was incredibly talented, and it was definitely an adjustment process to get used to. A lot more physical and definitely faster, like you mentioned, but just that strength and the talent that existed from top to bottom of every roster was an adjustment.
And how'd you balance the academic and hockey part of being a student athlete? Because that's something that a lot of players now tell me is like the hardest adjustment is just sort of balancing school and hockey, especially at a university like BC where the academics are very rigorous. So how
Mhm.
did you do it during your time?
Yeah, it's funny. So I would say going into college, I was very like, I don't know if spontaneous is the right word, but like kind of just went with the flow of things. Like school was important, but I felt like wasn't as rigorous as obviously what you're dealing with in college. So I was able to, you know, ebb and flow, do my work, but like, oh, we had an opportunity to do this or whatever. And I could just kind of go with the flow and make it work. That wasn't the way in college. It's, you know, like you mentioned, academics at BC are very rigorous. And so I've recently learned from my loving friends that I'm now more type A, apparently. I don't know if I totally agree, but I do think that having to figure out at BC, and I also played softball, so adding that into the mix, there wasn't a lot of free periods of time outside of class and outside of practice. And so I had to survive and make it. I had to become very, I guess, type A and figuring out like I need to study between this time and this time, eat at this time, whatever, because if anything kind of fell out of that, there weren't extra hours to make up whatever it was that I missed. So there were definitely years that I did better than others in scheduling things out, but I think the addition of softball really kind of forced me to stick to a schedule because if I didn't, I would find myself in a pretty tough situation in some classes. But that's how I survived, and that time management has kind of stuck with me since college, it appears.
Yeah. And I didn't know that you played softball at BC.
Mhm.
Preparing for this interview, what was that
Yeah,
like, sort of playing two sports? Because
it
that's
was
something you don't see that
incredible.
often
Yeah,
anymore.
I mean, I got to give credit for allowing me to do that, but she was a two-sport athlete in college, so she for sure gets it. But both sets of coaches and both sets of teams were super supportive. Obviously, with that type of, I think I see it more commonly with like a fall sport and a spring sport, but with hockey being almost a full year, there were definitely overlaps in the season. So any given year, depending on how our hockey team did, is how much of the softball season I missed. So if we went into like NCAA's like we did my junior year, I missed our entire spring break trip and like the first couple weekends of ACC play. So, you know, luckily I had amazing teammates on both sides and great coaching staffs that, you know, were very understanding. So it was always a fairly seamless transition to go from one sport to the next. But I mean, it was just the atmospheres and everything are so different. And then obviously we were playing in the Atlantic Coast Conference. So for softball, we're traveling down to Florida and into the Carolinas, where hockey, you're kind of staying in more of the colder climates. But I am really blessed to have both experiences. And I wouldn't trade people to do both for anything.
Yeah, I don't know what it's like in softball, but I know for baseball, a lot of the guys go out to like California or
Mhm.
there, and
Yep.
it's there. A lot of the hockey players get a little jealous that they get to be in the warm weather a little bit. So I'm assuming that was a similar experience.
Yeah, definitely. I think my first softball, and at this time, Stanford was one of the top collegiate softball programs in the entire country. But I was able to make our spring break trip. I think it was like the tail end. So they were there for 2 full weeks. I missed the first week, but was able to fly out there and catch up the second week. And my very first game was at Stanford. Like I literally got off the plane, they drove me to the field at Stanford. And I'm like, this is incredible. This is an experience I've never had in hockey. I would love to.
Mhm.
But yeah, so that was my very first college softball experience was in that San Jose, San Francisco area. I think we played like two tournaments on each weekend and then had 3 or 4 midweek games. So that's the other thing with softball is there's a ton of games. You definitely play more games than practice when you're fully in season, which is kind of a polar opposite of what you see with hockey.
Now let's talk a little bit about your hockey career at BC. So
Mhm.
during your freshman year, your team won your first Beanpot, beating BU at Conti. So talk about first of all playing in the Beanpot and what you took away from that, but also winning it your freshman year at Boston College against a good BU team.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is another thing of where a lot of East Coast people don't understand the Minnesota high school scene.
Hmm.
I had no idea what the Beanpot was. And so I very quickly learned how important that is and, you know, what it means across the city. And I was right in there. So it feels like a NCAA tournament just in the middle of your season. So it's definitely a really special experience just from the history of it and all of the teams being in that small area. But I think freshman year, what was even more special than being able to win it against BU at home was our semifinal game against Harvard. So this was a Harvard team that had Julie Chu, I think Caroline Willett was not, no, she was UMD, but they had Julie Chu, Sarah Vinecourt, like they were stacked and they were one of the top teams in the entire country and had been for, a few years. And so here we come kind of new kids on the block to even the top 10. And we went into triple overtime with them at Conti. We were the 8 o'clock game. So, that game never starts on time as it is. And I remember we were playing until like 2 in the morning. They started playing it on like the BC TVs. So people's dorms were just like tuning into it. And you'd see stragglers kind of coming into the rink, but we played until 1, 2 in the morning. And then we ended up winning in triple overtime. And that was just such a surreal experience. It felt like winning a championship on a Tuesday. And then to come back the following week against, again, like you said, a strong BU team and finish it out. But that was a period of really that changed kind of the trajectory of my freshman year for sure. To, the Frozen Four and everything beyond that.
Yeah, Sarah Vinecourt was one of the best women's college hockey players. I feel like no one talks about her now. When you look at
For
like
sure.
books, I think she's top
Yeah.
5 in like points of all time.
Yeah, she was incredible. And then they had Chewy, and I mean, they were a very, very stacked team. And we were a very significant underdog. So we knew, I was like, oh, our first Beanpot, we're like at home, but might have the worst schedule. And to pull it out was pretty cool.
That's awesome. And also during your freshman year, you guys got your first national tournament win, beating
Hmm.
Dartmouth in overtime 3-2. Talk about that game and what you remember for it, and also what it was like getting that victory on the road as well. And just reading about the game, it said that you got the third goal of the game, but it never said if it was the overtime goal or not. So I want to ask if you did score that overtime goal or not, and just talk about that entire game experience as well.
Yeah, it was a surreal experience. That was the first time that BC had made it to the NCAA tournament. So being part of that was just incredibly special from the get-go. And we went into it, again, we're the new kids on the block in terms of this part of the season, and it's first time for BC. So the nerves were definitely there. And it was a really back and forth game, and they had some really big firepower as well with like Jillian Apps. So, a lot of Canadian superstars in these big games that we're playing against. So I just remember we were kind of trading goals, and the goal I got had to be, it wasn't the overtime game winner. So it had to be the third in line of, it must have been 1-1 at the time. And we were shorthanded, and I blocked a shot and then passed it over to Kelly Stack, and we just kind of went down the ice, 2-on-1, and she made an incredible pass back to me in the back door, and we were able to put it in. And I remember jumping in the air and like it was just such a surreal experience at that moment because I want to say it was fairly late in the game, but I don't remember exactly. I know what end we were shooting on that we had taken, and then they ended up tying it up, and then Megan Fartelman scored the OT game winner, and we just went crazy. It was, again, they were the number 2 seed in the country, I think, at the time, and we were the 7, so it wasn't anything that we were expected to come in there and make it a game, and to walk out with that overtime winner and get to go to the Frozen Four was just so much fun to be part of.
And you got to play in the Frozen Four that year against Minnesota Duluth at Lake Placid.
Hmm.
First, what was your Frozen Four experience like, both on and off the ice? Because today there's a lot of pomp and circ with it, with the whole red carpet and stuff. I'm curious if that was the case when you played in the Frozen Four. And even though you lost that game against Duluth, what'd you take away just from the whole experience, from the on ice perspective?
Yeah, I don't think we had quite like the red carpet experience, but that's not to say they didn't, pull out all the stops to really make Lake Placid feel like this out of universe kind of experience. Everything in the town was, there was banners about the Frozen Four. Our hotels had team banners on the inside, and it really did feel like you were at an incredibly special event, which you were. And then being able to play, obviously, at an historic arena like Lake Placid was just kind of the icing on the cake for that whole experience. But yeah, I remember coming in, and again, we're the low seed coming into the Frozen Four, but we're just like, we're ready, like we're riding on a high of some. I think the Beanpot is such a unique and special thing to be able to be a part of, because you get to experience that tournament feel, that playoff feel, the do or die mentality earlier in your season before you get into those actual situations. So that's just kind of what it it felt like a continuation of, and we knew that all the teams that were there were, tremendously talented, and it was going to be a battle, but we were just looking to experience it and be part of it. And that game against UMD, I don't remember everything. It's so funny. You hear when you're growing up, like, oh, you're not going to remember the specific parts of games, but you'll remember the experiences, and that could not ring more true. But I know, again, it was another back and forth game, and we had Schaus in net, and she was making huge saves, and all of our seniors and all of our older players were just coming through. Deb Spillane had a big goal, and then we went into double overtime, and you knew it was going to be something not the most ideal, and it was just a seemingly innocent rush, and they passed it back to their kind of third guy high, and they shot it, and that was the end of it, and it just was over in an instant. But the experience itself, I mean, we felt like rock stars. It wasn't quite the production it is now, but to us, it was an incredible opportunity and something so special.
Well, that's good to hear that because I feel like a lot of people, whenever they lose a big game, it's devastating right after it happens. But I feel like once you're years removed from it, you sort of appreciate the experience more than just the game itself.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I mean, I think if you asked a day later, it would not have been the same reaction. But
Mhm.
now looking back, not everybody gets to experience playing in a Frozen Four. And I think that's something that, if you do, you kind of take for granted. But it really is something that not many people get to do. And so even though it didn't work out in our favor, to have the experience and be part of it, and thing that, again, not many people get to have that experience. So to have it is really cool.
Yeah, and also just I guess Lake Placid is the site of one of the best American hockey moments of all time. I guess how cool was it to be in that building? Because Miracle is one of my favorite movies. I can quote it for
Yeah.
days, so it was kind of cool. It must have been cool to sort of be in that sort of building.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I'd be lying to you if we didn't try to use some of the, we watched Miracle, and we were hoping to be that US team that was the underdog coming in and making waves. And unfortunately, it didn't quite work out for us that way, but we put up a huge fight, and that's definitely something to be proud of. So it was, yeah, but exactly. I mean, knowing the history of that building and everything that had gone on, um, and how incredible that gold medal was for the 1980 team and the US in general, to be able to be at the scene and in a similar position to them. We were hoping to kind of follow in their footsteps, but unfortunately that didn't happen.
Yeah, yeah. As long as you didn't like recreate like the bag skate scene, because that
No,
definitely
we
probably
didn't
was not fun.
did not want any part of that,
Yeah.
preferably.
Yeah. No, that's just such a good movie. And I don't know how much of it is true. Like the part when the guy like hurts his leg in the game and then Herb Brooks tells him to like get back up and he calls him like a candy, you know what? And there's like a whole that apparently that did happen, but I don't it's kind of cool. It will be kind of interesting to see like what did it actually look like when it did.
So oddly enough, one of my good friends, Sarah Alquist Schneider now, she ended up marrying Billy Schneider, who's Buzz Schneider's son, who played him in the movie.
Uh
So get a kind of unique perspective from them. But yeah, I mean, they say altogether from the movie to the actual experience, it's one of those things that you just relive over and over, and it's equally as special every time.
Now, after a tough sophomore year, your team improved massively your junior season, winning a Beanpot again, making it to the hockey's championship game and national tournament. I'm curious, what were some things your team worked on that led to your improvement your junior year? And yeah, just talk about that. Like, what were some of the things you worked on and your team worked on that led to the success that you had from your sophomore year to your junior year?
Yeah, for sure. We had such a tremendous freshman season, and a lot of those players came back. I think we only graduated two going into my sophomore year, and it just wasn't as successful of a season. I can't pinpoint anything to look back and be like, oh, like that's why we didn't do well, because it really didn't make sense. But that's just how college hockey goes. And, there is so much talent across Hockey East and the entire country that sometimes that unfortunately just it ebbs and flows in the wrong direction for you. But, I think that experience as a team of going from tremendous success to not as much really made us very hungry for my junior year, because we didn't want to have another sophomore season. We wanted to go back to that freshman year, enjoy those highs, and kind of be that team that we knew that we could be. So when I look to that junior season, there was just kind of a different tone from the beginning of the year throughout. That was just like, we know we can do this. We have the talent. Like, let's come together, do whatever it takes to make this work. And I think that group really bought into that. Everybody kind of bought into whatever their role may be, and we all just wanted each other to succeed. Um, that was probably one of the closest teams that I've been on. I think freshman year was too. It's different being that new kid on the block, and you're just going to learn everything for the first time. But that junior season, I think our team really came together, and we were so hungry for that level of success that we had freshman year, that's really what drove us. And then just the camaraderie and the chemistry helped us get back to kind of those heights.
Yeah, and your team went on a little bit of a run during the Hockey East playoffs. You made it all the way to the championship game. What was that experience like for you? One, beating BU in the semifinals, that must have been fun. But just talk a little bit about that championship game because I'm curious what made UNH so dominant during your time in college hockey. Because I was looking at the champions list, and your 4 years in college hockey, they won Hockey East every single
Hmm.
time. So I'm assuming that was probably these years they had like Casey Bellamy and all those top
Hmm.
players. But I'm curious what you thought made them such a good team, and what was it like playing them in that championship game?
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure it was at UNH, and their rink is gigantic. So it's always, we call it Lake Witt, um, but it's always an experience to play there. There's just so much space, and I think that the UNH team during that era was so talented top to bottom. Court Sheary's our assistant coach on the Pride, and we kind of reminisce about this all the time. I'm like, you guys just had talent everywhere. Like, you had first line players on your fourth line. They had leading goal scorers in the entire country. They had Kelly Patton and Michaela Long, Courtney Burchard, Casey Bellamy, Sam Faber. Like, the list just goes on and on. And these are all like well-known, tremendous athletes, and they were really hard to play against. And then I think also they really did use their rink to kind of their advantage. Not saying obviously they were tremendous at away games as well, but it was especially hard to play against them at the Whittemore Center because that was a larger ice surface than any of us had, and they knew how to use it and how to use it to their skill set. And all of a sudden they're getting breakaways left and right, and just they made it work, and they just had an unbelievable amount of talent all in one place, and they were incredibly hard to play against.
That's interesting to hear you say that because I feel like for an offensive player like yourself, you would love the bigger ice surface because you have more space to sort of have space to make like moves, but also shooting lanes and all that stuff. So
Hmm.
that's pretty interesting to hear.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I get that a lot. That, oh, I figure you would love it, and I definitely did enjoy it. But one thing I always kind of say is it's so wide to the point of, like, if you're trying to go wide, there's a lot of angle back to the center, if you play it right. And so it's almost one of those where it's like a little bit too much room. But yeah, I mean, definitely it is a really fun place to play. And offensively, you're able to generate some of those additional chances because of the room and space that exists there. And they were very good at doing that.
I hate to break it to you. I think they're making it now regular. It's not going to be Olympic
I
ice
That's what I've
surface in the next
heard.
few years.
Yeah. Yeah, that's too bad. It's a national
Now,
treasure.
I know, and I feel like maybe it'll be interesting to see what your team would have done when it was an Olympic ice
Yeah.
surface to see like if I don't know
Yeah,
if there
let's go
were
back and like redo all of
yeah,
it and see what
I don't
happens.
know if there'll be any changes to it. I'm just to the results, but it'd
No.
just be interesting to see what would have happened.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like, their team was just so talented, and that's why they won just
Hmm.
fine on the road and everything, but they did definitely use their ice to their advantage in a very strategic way, but they were so talented top to bottom, and, I mean, I think of the players I named, there's probably another 10 that I'm missing, um, because I'm forgetful in my old age, but that's the thing, like, there was no shortage of firepower. Lines 1 through 4 were threatening. There were like all-star type players in every facet of their lineup, and it was incredible to see.
Now you played Minnesota on the road in that tournament, that season. What was that game like for you? One, playing in your home
Mm,
state, but also that Minnesota team was filled with a lot of talented players like the Lamoureux twins and Gigi Marvin, just to name a few. So that
mhm.
must have been cool to get the chance to play against them in that game, but also play in your home state and just talk about that experience and how it compared to the one against Dartmouth, besides the result, obviously.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I remember when we were at the selection show and found out that that's where that we were going. I was so excited. I mostly obviously just to be able to play at home and play in front of family and friends, but it was so much fun to play there because they have so many fans. It's a packed house pretty much every weekend that they play. And I had grown up watching them at that arena, and so to be on the ice there, even though on the opposing team, it was still really surreal and really fun to be part of. And we had a ton of fans there supporting us as well, so it was not quite a 50-50 split, but a ton of people in kind of our corner there, and just the whole production that they had no shortage of firepower either, and they had great goaltending, and so it was really a back and forth battle, and I think it was like 4-4 or something, or 4-3, and that was higher scoring than I think anybody had thought, given the defense and the goaltending that each team had. But it was another one that, I think we had 2-on-1 or something that hit the post, and it's, the famous different game, and unfortunately, that wasn't the bounce that we had going for us that night, but I know it was one that coulda gone either way, and it's tough to end your season like that, looking back at, like, little minute things that could have changed the outcome, but that's how hockey is, and
Yeah,
it
that's why they
was,
call it a game of inches.
exactly, it really is, and so I know it was a pretty devastating loss, because that was one where I think we were really starting to peak at the right times that season, and we went into that game, not feeling like the underdog that we felt like at UNH. They were definitely the high seed, obviously, they were hosting, but we didn't feel that underdog type feeling where it was like it would be miraculous for us to win. Like, we knew we could do it, and we had the talent to do it, we had the team to do it, and unfortunately it didn't go our way that night. So I think that one stings a little bit more, but it was still, if you have to end your season, which everybody does, that's a pretty cool environment and atmosphere to have it happen in.
Now, as a senior, what type of leadership did you want to bring to the team? Were you more of a vocal or lead by example type of player?
I always kind of feel like it's funny because now, not that it's necessarily different, but I feel like in college especially and growing up, I was really quiet. Was not, and I think that's part of what was helpful for me going to BC is having to, branch out. But so I kind of always looked at myself at that stage as more of like a lead by example. I wasn't super vocal. I wasn't, like certainly not the person that you're looking to in the locker room to motivate in terms of, giving big speeches and kind of the hoorah, being that cheerleader type. I was very quiet. And so I was kind of more of that lead by example, quiet leadership type style. And so I think that year, especially, we had a really young team. I think we only had two seniors, maybe three, one junior, and then the rest was sophomores and freshmen. So it was definitely a unique experience from that part. So I think what I was looking to give from like that leadership side was just to help show them the way. Because I remembered what it was like coming in as a freshman. Number one, you're getting used to the school in general and then the schedule of college athletics and all of those things. And so I just tried to be a resource to all of them and to help kind of foster, whatever help they may need. And so that was kind of the leadership approach that I took was on more of a personal level of trying to get to know everybody and being a resource for them for anything that they may need, whether it's on the ice or off the ice. But so that was kind of what I was aiming to do as a senior.
And just talk a little about your senior year. Obviously, it didn't go your way compared to your freshman and junior year, but I guess what'd you take away from it?
Yeah, it was definitely a trying year in terms of, having so much success the year prior to not seeing as much success on the ice. But I think what was really special and unique is, I mean, we only had like 17 or 18 rostered players that year. We were missing Schaus and Stack to the Olympics. So it wasn't like we were expected to reach the heights that we had. We were very young, and I think it was special in its own right because we won some games that we weren't supposed to. And, seeing the freshmen have some of their milestones and firsts was really cool. And I think it set the stage for their success later in their career. So although like didn't get to be a part of those successful seasons, I think BC hockey really kind of took off after those years, and it was successful, successive Frozen Fours and Hockey East championships, and so just being part of their entrance into college hockey, and it in a way it was maybe helpful because a lot of players, everybody had a big role, that year. We didn't have 26 people where, six people are sitting in the stands. Everybody was playing, everybody was important. And so that's kind of a unique experience. And so it was really fun to help younger players kind of into the world of college hockey and then to see them succeed so much afterwards was really special too.
Yeah, I know that definitely when you look at BC women's hockey history, you're one of those, I guess, players that really helped the program get so much better. And I think if you're a fan of the team, you're definitely a player to like thank just because you really helped us set the foundation for what the culture is supposed to be like, but also just like the how to like achieve success also and doing it the right way, which I think is a very hard thing to do.
For sure. Yeah, it was definitely special to be a part of like those firsts for BC, the first Hockey East championship, the first Frozen Four, not the first Beanpot, but it was that was really the beginning of when BC started to become a powerhouse. And looking back and being part of like that early building, it really is something that you can't take for granted. And it's awesome to see where they're at now and know that you were a part of that build.
Now, looking back on it now, how did your college hockey experience help you not only as a pro hockey player today, but as an adult off the ice?
Yeah, I think BC, I always say, BC really shaped me for who I am today. Coming into BC, I was a very, very painfully shy person. Not to embarrass myself too much, but I could barely even sleep over at people's houses. I was the kid that called my mom at, midnight and said, "Can you come get me?" Like I was such a homebody, somebody that just, was more comfortable in that setting. And so now all of a sudden I find myself halfway across the country where the quickest you can get to me is maybe a 3-hour plane ride. And I really had to kind of branch out. Like I, relied a lot on some of my more outgoing, or I don't like the word outspoken because that can have, but like my friends at home that were more comfortable speaking and doing those things, I leaned on them a lot in high school and stuff to help me with things that I wasn't comfortable. And so being at BC, I kind of had to figure it out. I had to really branch out and become an adult and self-sufficient, if you will. And I think that really did shape who I am as a person. And I also still hold with me that empathy of people who also may be shy and, not as outgoing and so I think that that really helped me become who I am, be comfortable, in public settings and be comfortable making friends and putting myself out there, whatever may happen from there. And then, of course, obviously, the education is tremendously important, but the hockey side too. We fortunately or unfortunately didn't have 4 smooth sailing, super successful seasons. We had to kind of go into the trenches and figure out how to get back out multiple times. And I think that those experiences really help you later on as things that aren't ideal come up or adversity hits you, figuring out how to climb out of those holes and reach new heights. And so I think that I had all of those experiences at BC and they really did help me. Really close with a few like Deb Spillane. We were just texting the other day, Steph Olchowski. I see Court and Kinger every now and then and still keep in touch with them. I think BC is one of those that like it is lifelong friendships and people that you kind of hang on to, from my class, like Molly Schaus, we're still super close, Caitlin Kurth. The list goes on and on. And I think we're all still pretty well connected. Shannon Webster just saw the other day. So yeah, I think that we definitely are a tight knit group that continues to keep in contact. And it's unfortunate we live at all different parts across the country, but it's really cool network to keep in touch with and be a part of.
Do you still watch the team today, and any thoughts on some of the new players?
Yeah, it's really fun to watch. And now being here, like every time when I was playing with Minnesota, when we would come to play the Pride, I'd try to make it over to BC to at least just say hi or, whatever. And so over the years, I've met several of their teams or spoke to several of the teams. And now being here and kind of having that up and personal view has been really fun to see. I mean, obviously they have, Hannah Bilka, Kayla Barnes, just huge names that are making waves on national teams, and then Abby Levy as their goalie. So they're really fun to watch right now. And I love seeing their success and seeing how far the program has gone. That's been really fun to see up close and personal.
Yeah, no, I really like Abby Newhook a lot. I feel like since
Yeah.
there's so
Oh
many
yeah, Abby
talented
Newhook
players
also.
on
Yeah.
BC, like I feel like
Mhm.
sometimes people forget about her, but I really think she has one of the best shots in college hockey.
Oh, for sure. And I love her and her brother's relationship. And I don't know them personally, so I can't say that too much, but like just seeing like interactions
Mhm.
on social media and he's winning a Stanley Cup and giving credit to his sister and always advertising her things. And I think that's just so special and that's just one of those things that's going to add exposure to the women's game. And so I just love to see that and see that sibling rivalry, but also support is really cool. And she, as you're right, she has had tremendous years. And I remember when Court and Kinger were telling me about her coming in as a freshman, because I believe Alex was a year ahead of her on the men's team. And like, if you think he's good, wait till you see his sister. And so, yeah, I mean, she's a tremendous player as well. And they just, they have a fun team to watch for sure.
Yeah. Now that sort of leads into my one of my last questions, but what should be done to help grow women's hockey in your opinion? Honestly, I feel like the college game has gotten a lot better over the years with the TV. I think the big thing is just trying to put it on big TV networks so people can get exposure to it. But I really feel like if women's hockey wants to grow, it's in the pro game. So I wonder if what your take is on that and what do you think should be done to help grow? Because you've obviously seen it from both the college hockey perspective, but also the perspective as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest things in all of women's sports is just the exposure. And, there's so many times that I've had people that, come to a game for whatever reason, whether it's they know somebody or they're passing by or whatever it is, not necessarily an intention of going. And they're like, wow, I had no idea, it is fun to watch and you guys are talented. And is it a different game than the men's? Sure it is. But, that doesn't necessarily make it anything that you don't want to be part of. And so there's just so many people that will watch it for the first time and make comments and be like, "Wow, like I really enjoyed watching, where can I find more games?" And we are on ESPN Plus, which is perfect. But to be able to be more in that like mainstream media that you're just flipping through the channels and oh, there it is. I think back to when I was growing up, how easy it was to watch an NHL game. And while it's definitely getting easier to watch a women's game, it's not quite at that level where it's just top of mind, easy, turn the channel, there it is. And of course, video games too. I think that's another component that it's really great that NHL 23 does have women's players in it and it has, those national teams. And that's things that, growing up, you go for a few minutes, play NHL, and it's always, the teams that you see on TV. And now to have that same kind of level of recognition with the women's game, I think can help foster that excitement, that energy. But that's really where it's going to make the most impact is just getting viewership and getting exposure to it and showing young girls that they can be this too. Because, if you start doing something and you're like, well, I don't know that there's a future in it, then maybe you make a different decision at something that you can continue on to. So just making sure that young girls and boys see that there is a future in women's hockey and that they can grow up to be this as well. I think that helps foster that youth game and helps the excitement level there. And if we can grow youth levels in more numbers, then there's more numbers going to high school, there's more numbers going to college, and there's more people going pro. And then that grows the teams. And I think it just kind of goes from there. But it really starts with making sure that people can see it. Because if you can see it, you can be it, you can support it. And that's really going to be, I think, one of the big keys moving forward as women's hockey continues to grow.
And for all the younger people that listen to this podcast, what advice would you give them on what
A lot of tenacity, a lot of perseverance. It's not a smooth path. I think in the day of social media where you see so many highlights of people's lives, it seems like it's so linear and it's so I don't want to say easy, but it just seems like it's smooth. It's smooth sailing, and it's not. There's a lot of we talked about just my college career. There's a lot of ebb and flows. It's a roller coaster, and if you look more broadly through my entire career from when I started skating to now, it was anything but smooth. And I think that, whether you're getting cut from a team for the first time or maybe you didn't make the top team, that has no bearing on what you do 5, 10 years from now, even a year from then. And so if that's your goal and that's what you want to do, just keep working. Look at the things that you can improve upon. If you need help, ask for help. If reach out to players like myself or teammates. We're all very willing to help in whatever way that we can, give advice. But just don't give up, because tomorrow is a new day. The day after that, they're all new opportunities to find success. And I would love to tell you that my complete career from start to finish was just filled with successes, but I would be lying. There were a lot of, very low moments that I had to climb out of and find my way back. And it's not easy, but it's worth it. It's 100% worth it. And if you want it, you can do it. So just keep working hard and, do everything you can to get better, but don't let shortcomings hold you back because there's plenty of opportunity ahead for more success.
Now, do you have any shout outs you want to give to any of your former teammates with BC, current teammates, family members, friends? Feel free, or if you just want to say anything, feel free. The floor is all yours.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I've, always wanted is to just say thanks to everybody that has ever supported me in my career. Cause like I said, it hasn't been an easy path. And the lows are hard. And for all my friends and teammates at BC and high school, my parents, boyfriend, everybody for continuing to support me and believe in me and help me get to where I am today. And obviously all of my coaches, King and Court for help me through it. The Whitecaps organization, the Pride organization, just every teammate, they've all had an impact on my life, and have brought me to where I am today. And hopefully they do know that they have changed my life and really helped me get to where I am. And without all of their support through the years and their continuing belief in me, I'm 100% positive I wouldn't be here today. So I just really thank everybody that was a part of that.
Well, thank you so much, Allie, for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate your time. It means so much to myself. And I just want to let you know that I think you're a legend. And I hope that I wish you nothing but the best for the rest of your hockey career, but also off the ice as well. And it's funny to me because I only know you as a pro hockey player. It's always been fun watching you play. And I didn't know too much about your collegiate career, but it was fun looking back. And it's fun having players on from time when I never watched college hockey because I was like in preschool when you were playing. So,
Yeah, that
but
sounds about
it
right.
was really cool hearing your experience from Boston College, and I wish you nothing but continued success. And yeah, it's been so much fun watching you play as a pro hockey player, and I just want to let you know that I think you're the best. So, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. Yes, thank you for the support and thank you for bringing exposure to women's hockey because this is where it all starts. But I really appreciate all of that. So thank you for having me.